Alright folks, welcome back. Another installment of the F350 project here. I don't know what part this is, I'm losing track. But we're on to the cab, and I'm basically going around things to look for. These windshields have the garnish molding on them, and I don't want to have paint, since the windshield's not coming out, I don't want to have paint all over this sealant and stuff in here, so I will soft edge way down in that groove so that I don't get it in there and mask the windshield. Because what happens if you get a bunch of paint built up on those little rivets that hold the trim clips, it's just going to come off when you snap the trim clips on. So there's a lot of fiddly stuff to do like that. I've gone over this whole roof, and this whole side was surface rusted. I've hit it with 80 grit, and I'm filling dents in it. Now you remember I welded in the center up there. I'm basically just bringing you back to show you how much work goes into something like this, even when you don't think it's going to be a big problem. You can see 2 spots of filler up in the front that were dents. I'm not taking out every single one, but I'm trying to get everything you can see from the ground and anything major. If there's a bunch of little, you know, hail-sized dents up there, I'm not skimming this whole roof. I'm just not going to do it. Seam sealer has come out where the roof skin goes on. There's a little rust in there. That needs to be blasted, protecting the windshield, because sand or grit does bad things to the windshield. Other thing, the rain gutter channels. I've cleaned most of the seam sealer out, but I've just been sort of leapfrogging around on this truck, trying to get things done. This should be the final wipe of filler on this roof. I didn't realize, I don't know how it got here, but both sides of the roof, just above the top of the door, had dents in them all the way down almost to the marker light. I don't know if that's from putting your hand up here and squeezing over 26 years, I don't know. But clean up those window gutter channels, any of this kind of rust. I'll be honest, I'm not sure what Ford does from the factory in this roof joint here, but there's no seam sealer in it, and it's got a little rust in it. So that all has to be cleaned. Has to be scuffed up under these rain gutters, which is red Scotch-Brite type stuff. I mean, there's really not much you can do with that. I will redo all of the seam sealer in those gutters. I will seam seal all these joints. None of these joints had seam sealer from the factory, and I don't understand, I guess, why at least these didn't, and or the cab corners or any of this joint going up the side. I guess they figured no water's going to get in there. I probably am not going to seam seal up the sides, but I will seal right at the corner, and I'll seal these because I don't want rust bleeding out that you can see when the doors are even closed. I'll take you guys to the other side here. Same kind of thing on this door. This had some deep rust pits in it. I put some fiberglass in it, and I'll grind that flat, and then I'll wipe this with some Rage Ultra lightweight filler. Again, whatever flavor of filler is your choice, go for it, but I don't prime over fiberglass filler. It usually ends up with pits in it and air bubbles. It's just to fill the deep pits in there, and something that's strong too. People are going to be hitting their boots on this and so on and so forth, climbing in and out of this truck. I don't want that chipped off. There's not going to be any on the edge where people clack their boots on it, so that's good. These rockers, again, were in good shape. I don't know if the camera will pick it up. Those are rust discoloration. The rust has been stripped off of it, but where it went through the factory E-coat, it leaves a weird edge. It looks like just a map. And other than sanding all that E-coat off, which is a bad idea, there's no reason to do it. You're not going to get rid of that. The primer will hide it. It's going to get epoxy and high build primer on it. It's not going to be a problem. These weld joints, I will probably just wipe a little bit of filler over them just so you can't see them, but the weather strip goes down over it, so you don't see it anyway. It's just kind of my preference. And then, you know, we had a couple of spots in the back of this cab. And I asked the owner what he wanted me to do. I pulled the window out, which, though we could see a little bit of rust. There was a cell phone antenna from back in the early 90s that came out of this and looped up and hooked to the window. And what had happened, it rubbed all the paint off of it, and then it started to rust. Now, there is a rust hole in there. The problem is, it's double-walled steel, and I can't fathom trying to make a repair panel for this panel, and one for this panel, and one for the top here to go over it. And I asked the owner what he wanted to do, and he said just fill it. As long as it's sealed, it's up high enough that water shouldn't lay in it with the window seal against there, but that doesn't mean water won't get in there. It's not going to get salt spray up like it would if it were a rocker panel or a lower area of the truck. I would have rather welded it, but given the situation, that's what they wanted to do, so we'll leave it at that. There's another spot. I don't know if I can zoom on that. I'm not going to climb up there. Whoa, focus and mocus. Right there in the middle, and then one right next to it just had some pits in it, but everything else is clean. I got some fiberglass over the welds where I welded up the holes that were in the back of the cab. It's way messier than it needs to be, but I was trying to reach down in here. I had extra fiberglass and I was trying to wipe them instead of mixing up more and putting the bed up. So that's where it's at for now. I'll have this whole cab sanded down in 320 so that there's no 180 scratches in this paint before I go to epoxy. But anywhere there's a good amount of bare steel, I will try and get the 3-inch DA in there with a piece of 80 on it and scratch up that steel to give that epoxy some bite. Now if it's just a little area, I'm not worried about it, but anything, you know, more than the size of a quarter around the perimeter of my filler is going to get scratched up. Same, these rockers are in 80 grit out here, so it's just a lot of fiddling around. And I use, you've seen me use these before. This one just happens to be a Scotch-Brite one because I ran to a local auto parts store and picked this up, and it's got a roll lock type thing on it. And this is what we used to clean the seam sealer out of the rain gutter channels, because the rain gutter channels had rust in them. Now it wasn't terrible, it wasn't rotten, but you can see that that doesn't, I don't know if that's going to show you or not, doesn't quite fit perfect in there, but once it starts wearing, it'll wear a point on this and you can grind it out. Now I won't get every last drop of seam sealer out of there. That's not the goal. The goal is to get the majority of it out till I don't see any rust, because, you know, this kind of rust right here is what I saw just kind of along this edge right here where you see the green paint starting again. Now I'll strip the rest of that off before it's all said and done. I just want to give you an idea. That little bare steel that's right at my fingernail, that had rust on it, and the seam sealer was above it, and that's how far I had to strip it back till I couldn't see rust. Now wire wheels don't work terribly good for this. You have to run these at a slow RPM or it just heats up the seam sealer and gums it. This is factory sealer. It's single component seam sealer, not a 2-part epoxy. If it was epoxy, it might have stripped out easier with something like this, but that's the way I'm doing it. I think I showed in the last video, these doors and all the other panels got primed up. They're good to go. They've sat outside in the sun for 2 days and they're back in here just hanging out, curing up even more. The longer I can let them sit, the better off I'm going to be when it comes to blocking those out. And I'm not going to hand block these. This is all going to be done with a soft interface pad and a DA sander. And if I break through, I'll spot prime with some epoxy to cover up any bare metal and roll with it. So that's where it's at for now. I'm just going to wait for some stuff to kick up, and hopefully when I get this thing finished sanded out, I'll bring you guys back and you can see the process. There's really, for me, I don't have any good place to put the camera, and I know I talk about that all the time, but the videos would take forever and the editing would take forever if I showed you every last thing that's going on. I'm showing you what needed to be done and told you how I did it. You can go back to some older videos and actually physically watch me do this. When I have more time, I'll make more detailed stuff like that, but for now, you're just gonna see the process on how this whole truck gets put back together. All right, catch you guys later.